There was a time when the name Kang Gunwoo echoed in stadiums across the world. To fans, commentators, coaches, and even rival players, he was known as the undeniable genius of baseball. His skills weren't just great, they were legendary. Kang Gunwoo had broken records that had stood untouched for decades. He could swing the bat with surgical precision and throw a ball with blinding speed and impossible control. His journey through Major League Baseball had been nothing short of a miracle, and it was lined with glittering awards and milestones that others could only hope for in their wildest dreams. He had won the Best Hitter award. He had been named the Best Pitcher. He wore the coveted Golden Glove and was crowned the MVP of the league. Even more remarkably, he had become the MVP of the World Series. These achievements alone placed him among the all-time greats. But more than any trophy, any recognition, or any title, what meant the most to Kang Gunwoo was the World Series championship ring, a symbol, not just of victory, but of the countless sacrifices, sleepless nights, and relentless discipline that had brought him to the very top of the sport. And yet, as incredible as those days had been, they were now gone. What surrounded Kang Gunwoo in the present was not applause or celebration. It was silence, emptiness, and a haunting stillness that crept into every part of his being. He was no longer a man standing on top of the world. He was a man broken and crumbling under the weight of something far heavier than defeat on a baseball field. It wasn't a loss in the league, or an injury, or the slow passage of time that had pulled him down. It was something far more personal. Kang Gunwoo had lost the one person who mattered more to him than the game itself. Yuri, his wife, his best friend, and the only person who had been by his side before the world even knew his name, was no longer with him. They had divorced. The reasons were never made clear to anyone, perhaps not even to themselves, but the result was undeniable. She was gone, and Kang Gunwoo was devastated. The fame, the glory, and the fortune suddenly meant nothing. He no longer had someone to share them with. The luxury of his apartment, the gleam of his trophies, and the flash of camera lights, all of it faded in comparison to the quiet ache left by Yuri's absence. Kang Gunwoo found himself constantly drifting into painful thoughts, desperately wishing for a second chance. Over and over again, he wondered, what if I could turn back time? What if I could go back and fix everything before it fell apart? This thought consumed him, becoming the center of his sleepless nights and empty days. He didn't care about his stats anymore. He didn't care about being a legend. He cared about the one thing he had let slip away. And then, something impossible happened. One moment he was sitting alone, lost in despair, and the next, he found himself somewhere entirely unfamiliar. It was a place he had not seen in years, but one he recognized instantly. In front of him stood a man, and beside that man stood his father. Kang Gunwoo froze. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that man. It was the director, the very same director, who had once given him the opportunity to play in the Ocean League. The same man who had opened the door to everything that had followed. But something didn't make sense. Kang Gunwoo looked down and was stunned. He was wearing a school uniform. He wasn't dreaming. He wasn't hallucinating. Everything around him felt real, too real. The air, the floor beneath his feet, even the feeling of the fabric on his skin. He looked again at the director and his father, and something in him snapped into clarity somehow. Against all logic and reason, Kang Gunwoo had traveled back in time. His heart pounded. His mind raced. He didn't stop to question it or try to understand the how. All he knew was that he had been given the one thing he thought impossible, a second chance. Without hesitation, Kang Gunwoo ran. He sprinted out of the room, feet pounding against the floor as he tore through the building, rushing down the stairs as fast as he could. He didn't stop to catch his breath. He didn't slow down to think. There was only one place he needed to be: Yuri's apartment. When he reached the familiar door, his hands trembled as he pressed the doorbell over and over again in quick succession. His heart was racing, not from the run, but from the anticipation. And then, the door opened. Standing there was Yuri. But not the Yuri he had last seen. Not the woman hardened by years of silence and separation. She was young again, just like she had been back then. Her face still held the softness of youth, her eyes still full of life. The sight of her overwhelmed him. He couldn't stop himself. He moved forward and wrapped her in a tight embrace, as if his entire world depended on that moment. In his arms he felt warmth. He felt realness. It wasn't a dream. It was her. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Kang Gun-woo felt something other than sorrow. He felt hope. A few moments later, his phone rang. It was his father, and his voice carried a question that Kang Gun-woo had faced once before. The director, would Kang Gun-woo accept his offer? But this time the answer was different. Kang Gun-woo said no, and with that one word, everything shifted. Yuri, still standing there, stared at him in disbelief. She knew better than anyone how obsessed Kang Gun-woo had always been with baseball, especially his dream of flying to America and playing on the grandest stage of them all. For him to reject the very thing he had once burned for, it shook her deeply. But Kang Gun-woo had made his choice. This time, he wouldn't chase the same path blindly. He had already seen where it ended. Now, he was choosing something else, someone else. And that someone was Yuri. The moment Kang Gun-woo rejected the offer from the director, an expression of disbelief had frozen on Yuri's face. She was still processing what she had heard, trying to understand how the man who once would have given anything to go to the American League was now walking away from it so effortlessly. But Kang Gun-woo didn't have time to explain. A sudden dizziness gripped him. It was sharp and overwhelming, like his body was reacting violently to something unseen. His legs grew heavy, his arms lost strength. The world around him began to spin. The last thing he saw before everything faded to black was Yuri's startled expression. Her eyes wide with worry as his body collapsed to the ground. Then came the darkness, and within that darkness came memory. Like a storm of fragmented emotions, images from the past surged forward. He saw himself and Yuri no longer as the young versions they were now, but as the adults who had once tried and failed to stay together. Their voices echoed in silence, arguments, tension, distance. There were no smiles in these memories, only shadows of regret and words that left invisible wounds. He relived their fights, the strain, the final moments before their relationship was torn apart. In the middle of that chaos, there was one moment that stood out above all. Yuri had looked at him through eyes filled with quiet pain. She had asked him for something, 3 things, specifically. 3 requests that she wanted him to grant. But Kang Gun-woo, in his stubbornness and confusion, hadn't truly understood what she meant. At the time, those words were lost on him, like a whisper drowned out by the storm of their collapsing love. And now, it was too late to ask, or so he thought. Kang Gun-woo opened his eyes slowly. He was lying in bed, in a room that felt familiar but different. The headache had dulled, replaced by a strange clarity. As he sat up, his fingers instinctively brushed against the ring on his hand, the wedding band he thought had long since lost its shine. But something had changed. The ring, once dull and tarnished with time, now gleamed like it was brand new. The gold shimmered in the light, smooth and polished, untouched by age or wear. But more curious than the restored shine were the 3 tiny dots engraved beneath the band. 3 dots, simple and subtle, but to Kang Gun-woo, they were unmistakable. It was a sign, a reminder, 3 requests, still unknown, still waiting to be fulfilled. He didn't know what they were, but the message was clear. He had been given a second chance. Somehow, impossibly, he had been sent back, not just to relive his youth, but to rewrite the very decisions that had led him to lose Yuri in the first place. This wasn't just about baseball. This wasn't about fame. This was about making things right. In the days that followed, Kang Gun-woo spent more time with Yuri. They ate together, talked about little things, shared ordinary moments that once had slipped away unnoticed. It was during one of those meals that something curious happened. A seemingly simple conversation revealed something unexpected. Yuri spoke passionately about the Ocean baseball team. It surprised him. He listened as she spoke with childlike enthusiasm about how much she adored the team. Even when she was a little girl, she had cheered for them with all her heart. And then she said something that stuck in his mind, how, as a child, she once wrote a letter to Santa Claus. In it, she didn't ask for toys or candy or dolls. She asked for just one thing, for the Ocean team to win. That one statement echoed in Kang Gunwoo's thoughts like a bell tolling in the quiet. He began to wonder, could it be? Could one of Yuri's mysterious 3 wishes be related to that childhood dream? Could it be that simple? That meaningful? Exactly 1 week later, Kang Gunwoo made a decision that shook everyone. He joined the Ocean baseball team. The media exploded. Reporters scrambled to cover the story. Fans were stunned. Commentators debated endlessly. Just days ago, Kang Gunwoo had rejected Ocean with absolute certainty. He had made it perfectly clear that his goal was to enter the AS League, the grand stage of American baseball. His focus had always been singular, his ambition unshakable, and now, out of nowhere, he had turned toward the very team he had once dismissed. People demanded explanations, but Kang Gunwoo said nothing. There were no press conferences, no public statements, just silence. Because the real reason for his choice wasn't something he could explain to the world. It wasn't about contracts, or championships, or statistics. It was about Yuri, as he stood in the OCEA uniform, surrounded by flashing cameras and voices shouting his name. Kang Gunwoo thought quietly to himself. If Santa Claus was real, if he could somehow hear the wishes of a little girl from long ago, then maybe this was how those wishes would be answered. Maybe this was how her happiness could be returned, and maybe, just maybe, this was how Kang Gunwoo could begin to fulfill the 3 promises he never understood the first time. The director arrived with a presence that was difficult to ignore. Confident and composed, he came prepared, not just to talk, but to make an offer. He laid it all out clearly: the salary Kang Gunwoo would receive, the expectations the team had, the responsibilities he would take on if he joined. It was a serious proposal, one that would normally take days or weeks of consideration. But for Kang Gunwoo, the answer had already been forming in his mind long before the words were spoken. He didn't need time to think. He wanted to join Ocean. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about the spotlight that would surely follow him wherever he went. It was something deeper. A personal decision tied to something more important than baseball itself. And on top of that, Kang Gunwoo could see clearly that Ocean needed him. The team was struggling. The director had ambition, but not the talent to match it until now. So when Kang Gunwoo said yes without hesitation, the director was caught off guard. He had expected pushback, maybe negotiation. He had prepared arguments to convince Kang Gunwoo, but none of that was needed. The acceptance came so easily that even the director, with all his years of experience, was momentarily stunned. Still, he quickly regained his composure and decided to move forward with a condition, a small but critical requirement. The condition was specific. Kang Gunwoo was not to reveal his decision to the public yet, not even to the people close to him. The director wanted to control the announcement, to create a shockwave in the professional baseball world. To Kang Gunwoo, this wasn't a big issue. The condition felt like it applied only to him, a personal burden he could carry. And so, without protest, he agreed. But even a simple condition could complicate things. Later that day, as Kang Gunwoo stepped outside, he ran into Yuri. The sight of her still stirred something deep within him: familiarity, longing, and a quiet ache. But because of the director's request, he averted his gaze. He turned his head, avoiding her eyes. It wasn't out of guilt or shame, but necessity. Yuri noticed immediately. To her, it felt strange and unusual. Kang Gunwoo, who had always looked at her with clear affection, now couldn't meet her eyes. Her mind began to race. A quiet suspicion formed in her heart. She wondered if perhaps he had found someone new. The thought unsettled her more than she expected. But she didn't voice it. The moment grew even more complicated when her father suddenly appeared. There was no time to escape the situation. Kang Gunwoo stood before Yuri and her father, knowing he had a choice: continue hiding the truth, or be honest with the family that had once treated him like one of their own. In the end, he chose honesty. Kang Gunwoo told them everything. He told them he would be joining Ocean. The room filled with surprise. But it was not the kind of shock he had feared. To his relief, everyone in Yuri's household reacted with genuine joy. They were proud of him, happy that he had found his way again. The news brought excitement, even celebration. But there was one exception. Kang Gunwoo's own father, who had also heard the news, responded with quiet disappointment. He had dreamed of seeing his son shine in America, playing in the grand stadiums of the AS League. To him, Ocean was a step backward, not forward. Though he didn't say much, the look in his eyes said enough. Still, he didn't stop Kang Gunwoo. The decision had been made, in the midst of the family gathering. Another complication arose. YURI's younger sister, one of the most active members of the OCEA and fanbase online, was ecstatic. Her excitement boiled over, and she immediately reached for her phone, eager to share the news on social media. To her, this was history, a dream come true. But Kang Gunwoo reacted swiftly. He couldn't let the secret slip. He stopped her. His voice was firm, sharper than usual. He scolded her, told her clearly that nothing could be posted. She was taken aback, a little hurt, but ultimately understood. The announcement wasn't hers to make. Somewhere else, away from all the emotion, the director was preparing for his moment. He stood behind closed doors, organizing the upcoming professional player draft conference. He knew this wasn't just another draft. This was the moment he had been waiting for, a chance to surprise everyone, to leave every other team in shock. He had kept Kang Gunwoo's decision a secret, holding it close like a trump card, and now, he was ready to reveal it. As the event began, the room buzzed with energy. Representatives from every team were present, all eager to see which talents would be claimed. No one suspected what was coming. The director, holding back a smirk, approached the podium, and then, with a steady voice and absolute certainty, he made the announcement: Kang Gunwoo was joining Ocean. The reaction was instant and explosive. The entire room froze. Whispers turned into gasps, gasps into chaos. Social media exploded within seconds. The Ocean team's accounts flooded with activity. Fans lost their minds. Commentators didn't know what to say. Reporters scrambled to confirm the news. A player of Kang Gunwoo's caliber had chosen Ocean. It defied logic. It shattered expectations. And most importantly, it changed everything. Other team directors exchanged confused glances. Their carefully laid plans were suddenly meaningless. How were they supposed to compete with a team that now had the greatest baseball genius of their generation? The chessboard had been flipped, and at the center of it all, calm and determined, stood Kang Gun, ready to walk a new path. Not for glory or legacy, but for something far more personal. With the director's grand announcement behind him, the spotlight now shifted to Kang Gunwoo. The media buzz was still spreading like wildfire, and anticipation built for his first public appearance as an official member of the OCEA and baseball team. Now it was time for Kang Gunwoo himself to attend his first formal interview. That morning, the air was filled with an odd mixture of excitement and tension. At his house, Kang Gunwoo was preparing himself to leave, dressed neatly, mentally composed. But he wasn't going alone. Yuri insisted on accompanying him. And not just accompanying, she treated the occasion like it was her own moment of glory. Before stepping outside, Yuri handed him a pair of sunglasses. It wasn't for fashion, it was to shield him from the sudden wave of public attention, and maybe to help him move more discreetly. But more than that, it was a small gesture of care. One of many she offered without hesitation. The car ride from the house to the interview building was anything but quiet. Yuri, as always when baseball was involved, especially Ocean baseball, became completely animated. She talked non-stop, rattling off team stats, recalling historic matches, reciting old chants, and listing all the reasons why this was the best possible decision Kang Gunwoo could have made. Her voice bubbled with pure joy. She was a fan first and foremost, and today, her favorite team was getting its biggest star. Kang Gunwoo sat silently through most of it, listening with half a smile. But his thoughts were elsewhere. Deep down, he was reminded of the agreement, the conditions he had set for himself. There was something he had to clarify, something that the public still didn't know. When the interview finally began, Kang Gunwoo didn't hesitate to speak his truth. He looked calm, composed, but his words shifted the entire atmosphere. He stated clearly that he would not be playing a dual role. He would not be both a hitter and a pitcher. He would only be a hitter. The silence that followed was deafening. Journalists blinked in disbelief. Fans watching the livestream flooded the chat with confusion. Baseball insiders tried to make sense of it. Kang Gunwoo, the once-in-a-generation talent who had dominated both positions, was willingly throwing away half of his potential. To many it felt like watching someone lock away a part of a miracle. Chaos erupted in the media. Commentators debated. Fans panicked. Rumors spun out of control. People couldn't understand why someone with his genius would limit himself so drastically. But Yuri understood at least. Part of her did. Even so, she was upset. Disappointed. She had been among those who believed in his greatness across the board. She confronted Kang Gunwoo afterward, frustrated by his decision. But as her emotions cooled, Kang Gunwoo was left with a heavy silence and a memory. He remembered. He remembered the future that once played out. The countless games where he had pushed his body beyond the limit. The matches where he had fought, both at the plate and on the mound. And the injuries. Again and again. His body breaking down. And every time, Yuri had been there, holding his hand in hospital rooms. Her face soaked with tears she tried to hide. Those memories weren't just scars on his body, they were wounds on her heart. This time, he didn't want to repeat that pain. That was why he chose this path, to protect her, even if she didn't yet understand it. Later that day, Kang Gunwoo remembered something he had prepared. A small gesture, a gift. He retrieved a box and handed it to Yuri. She opened it, curious, and immediately burst into joy. Inside was an outfit, cute, bright, and completely her style. It was something simple, yet it lit up her entire mood. She twirled in delight, her earlier frustration melting away in the warmth of the moment. Later, Kang Gunwoo invited her into his home. Yuri followed him inside, and when she stepped into the training room, her eyes widened in surprise. Standing in the corner was a fully installed SMC machine, an advanced piece of equipment that monitored and measured body movement, used only by the most elite athletes. It was something she never expected to see in a private home, and it impressed her deeply. Without hesitation, Yuri switched into a different mode. She became like a coach, a manager, a personal trainer, all rolled into one. She told Kang Gunwoo to start running diagnostic scans, checking his muscle balance, his form, his posture. She stood at his side, studying every reading with serious focus, offering feedback as if she were a part of his coaching staff. That night, they trained together. Hour after hour, they pushed through routines. Not as star, athlete, and fan, but as two people trying to build something importance, something they had once lost. But after the long night ended, something shifted. The house grew quiet. The machine's hum faded. Kang Gunwoo took a shower, cleaned up, and reached for his phone. He tried to call Yuri. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. A strange feeling crept into him, a sense that something wasn't right. Yuri had been so full of energy, so alive, just moments ago, and now, she was unreachable. The evening air felt heavier than usual as Kang Gunwoo stared at his phone screen, his fingers trembling slightly. He had tried calling Jang Yuri several times, but there had been no response. The silence was unsettling. After everything that had happened earlier, the training, the laughter, the connection, it didn't make sense. A strange sense of dread settled in his chest, and he could no longer sit still. Without wasting another second, Kang Gunwoo bolted from his house, his feet pounding against the pavement as he sprinted toward Yuri's apartment. His mind raced, with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Had something happened to her? Was she in danger? Was she sick? None of it felt right, but the anxiety clawed at his thoughts. When he finally reached her door, he pressed the bell with urgency. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then the door creaked open. Jang Yuri stood in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. She wasn't injured, she wasn't hurt. But she was crying openly and silently, the kind of crying that came from deep inside. Kang Gunwoo's heart dropped. He didn't know who had made her cry, or what had happened, But seeing her like that made everything else blur into the background. She didn't have to explain. In her hand was a phone, and on the screen was a news update. The OCEAN baseball team had just dropped to the bottom of the league standings. That was all it took to crush Yuri's heart. To most, it was just a team performance. But to Yuri, who had believed in Ocean since she was a child, who had cried and laughed for them, it was devastating. Her tears weren't just about disappointment, they were about heartbreak. Kang-gun clenched his fists. The impulse to promise something great surged through him. He wanted to declare right there that he would fix everything, that he would bring Ocean to the top, that he would make the world respect the team she loved so much. But something stopped him. He remembered the past, the countless times he had made promises that he had failed to keep. And each time, it was Jang Yuri who had suffered the most. The pain of broken words had left deeper marks than any defeat on the field. So instead of making another vow he might not fulfill, Kang Gun-woo simply held out his hand and invited her outside. They walked through the quiet streets, side by side, the night breeze cooling the heat of her tears. Yuri looked at him, confused, and asked where they were going. He didn't answer with words. Soon, they arrived at a local hitting center. The place was nearly empty, the lights casting soft shadows. Over the practice lanes, Kang Gun-woo picked up a bat, stepped onto the plate, and began hitting. Ball after ball, swing after swing. The sound of contact echoed across the building. Then he turned to her. He told her that, one day, he would hand her the championship ring, Ocean's championship ring. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't loud, but they held a weight that sank deep into Yuri's heart. Her eyes widened, and a soft blush colored her cheeks. She turned away suddenly, embarrassed, overwhelmed, touched. Then, without warning, she ran off, fleeing from the intensity of the moment. Her emotions tangled between happiness and shyness. Later, they stopped at a small diner to eat. They shared a meal together before returning home. The earlier storm of emotions now softened into a calm quietness. Back at Kang Gun-woo's house, something else awaited. On the TV screen, the team his father had always loved was playing and winning. Normally, that would have filled the house with celebration. His father would have jumped, shouted, clapped, his joy impossible to contain. But tonight, there was no cheer, no excitement, just silence. When Kang Gun-woo turned and saw his father's face, he understood. His father stood still, his expression heavy and unreadable. Though the team had won, he showed no signs of happiness. It didn't take much to guess why. Kang hadn't gone to the AS League. He had chosen Ocean. Later that evening, Kang Gun-woo spoke quietly with his mother. Her advice was simple. If you want to understand your father's heart, speak to him directly. Only then would he know the truth. The words sank in. Kang Gun-woo remembered the future that had once unfolded between him and his father, a future filled with arguments, cold distance, and bitter silence. Their relationship had turned sour, broken by resentment and misunderstanding. He had always blamed time, circumstance, pressure. But now he had a chance to change all of that. So he made a decision. He walked outside to the open yard, carrying 2 baseball gloves and a ball. He found his father and held out a glove. No words were exchanged. And yet, in that simple invitation, a wall between them began to crumble, under the wide sky. Father and son began playing catch, just like they used to when Kang Gun-woo was a child. The soft rhythm of the ball flying back and forth spoke louder than any conversation. Each throw carried memories. Each catch brought them closer. Eventually, Kang Gun-woo spoke. He apologized. He admitted he couldn't follow the path his father had hoped for. He couldn't go to the AS League. He had chosen a different dream. His father listened. And then, with quiet strength, he said that he understood and that he would support Kang Gun-woo, no matter what. As they continued playing, images from the past shimmered in Kang Gun-woo's mind. Bright summer afternoons, a child's laughter, a father's pride. In that moment, under the fading light, the past and the present merged, and for the first time in a long while, they were simply father and son again.